Apparently some of you guys really enjoyed my last video, so I'm going to try and stay back for good. Today we're going to look at my second installment of the worst contract on every team. I made a 2017 version about a year ago, and now before the calendar turns, I need to give you guys my 2018 version. Just going to get right into it. For the Anaheim Ducks, Ryan Kesler. 2017's pick was Kevin Bieksa, but since then his contract has expired and he's currently a free agent. So now this label lands on Ryan Kesler, who has a $6.875 million cap hit until the end of 2022. At 34 years old, his gritty, hard-nosed playing style has shown signs of regressions for years now, as he's producing offensively at a fourth to third liner rate, while his fancy stat puck possession numbers, also known as CORY, have significantly declined over the years. He only scored 8 goals last season, and this year it's not looking pretty either, and sadly he still has 3 years left on this deal. For the Arizona Coyotes, Dave Bolland. Credit to the Coyotes, as last year I couldn't really give you guys a pick either. They're a really well-managed team and don't have any real bad contracts, but for the sake of giving a name, I'll land on Dave Bolland. He hasn't played a game since 2016, but this is the last year of his $5.5 million cap hit, which hasn't even truly been on the books since he's permanently been on LTIR. For the Boston Bruins, David Backes. Last year's pick was Matt Beleskey, who has since been traded to the New York Rangers as a part of that Rick Nash trade. Backes, however, is in the third year of his 5-year, $30 million contract, giving him a flat $6 million cap hit in case any of you aren't mathematicians. He hasn't scored more than 20 goals since 2016, however he's still been solid defensively, but that just isn't worth $6 million in today's game. For the Buffalo Sabres, Matt Moulson. Our first returning pick, Moulson is in the final year of his 5-year, $25 million deal, of which he should owe about 50% to John Tavares. Even though this is the last year of his $5 million cap hit, Moulson is not even contributing to the Sabres or their farm team, as he's been on loan to the Ontario Reign, LA's AHL team, so basically Terry Pegula and the Buffalo Sabres are paying Matt Moulson $5 million to play against them. For the Calgary Flames, James Neal. Last year's pick, Troy Brouwer, was bought out of his remaining 2 years in August and since has signed with the Florida Panthers. James Neal, however, hasn't been his usual self. He's in the first year of that 5-year, $28.75 million contract that he signed in July, giving him a $5.75 million cap hit. Although he's been one of the NHL's deadliest shooters in recent years, Neal has struggled so far this season, to say the least. He currently only has 3 goals and 4 assists, which puts him on par with the average fourth liner. If Neal isn't able to turn this season around, the next 4 years might get really ugly. The Carolina Hurricanes, Scott Darling. Last year's pick, Marcus Kruger, has since been traded to Arizona, then flipped back to Chicago for the ghost of Marian Gaborik. Scott Darling, however, has been extremely disappointing since signing that 4-year, $16.6 million contract in the summer of 2017. Ever since he's been a Hurricane, he's struggled massively. Last season, he recorded an .888 save percentage across 43 games, and this season, he put up an even worse .884 in 8 games before being sent down to the AHL. Darling has always been one for a good comeback throughout his career, so for the Hurricanes' sake, let's hope he finds his game again. For the Chicago Blackhawks, our second returning player, Brent Seabrook. He's in the third year of his massive 8-year, $55 million deal, and he continues to show signs of regression. His offensive numbers have been dropping since 2015, however this season has been his first real drop in his possession and defensive numbers. Whether that's due to Chicago's lack of success or vice versa, it's still a long road ahead for Seabrook's contract. For the Colorado Avalanche, another returner, Carl Soderberg. Although he slightly rebounded this season as he's already nearing his goal total from last year, Soderberg is still in the second to last year with his $4.75 million cap hit. His possession numbers are still terrible, and he's yet to score more than 16 goals at the NHL level, so it'll be interesting to track him for the rest of the year, so we'll see what happens with Soderberg in the future. The Columbus Blue Jackets, David Savard. Last year's pick, Jack Johnson, has since signed with Pittsburgh, so Columbus doesn't really have a lot of bad contracts, especially with their reluctance to pay high salaries. So even though I don't really think it's a bad contract, his $4.25 million cap hit could be considered a little bit high. The Dallas Stars, Martin Hanzal. Last year's pick, Kari Lehtonen, is now a free agent after his contract expired last summer, so this year's pick lands on Martin Hanzal. He's in the second year of his 3-year deal with a cap hit of $4.75 million, and so far it has not gone well. Last year, Hanzal played in just 38 games and put up just 10 points. I know what you're going to say, yes, Martin Hanzal is a defensive player, and while his possession numbers have been terrible too. So far this season he's played in just 4 games, and even though it's a small sample size, his Corsi percentage is at disastrous 38%. If you don't know what Corsi is, all you have to know is that 38% is horrendous. Detroit Red Wings, it's still Jonathan Ericsson. He's in the 5th year of his 6-year deal with that $4.25 million cap hit, and it's still terrible. He has no offensive capabilities. He had 13 points last season and has 2 so far this season, and he's been even worse defensively. He hasn't had a positive possession number since 2014, and in this year's through 16 games, he's at 39.5%. For the Edmonton Oilers, it's Milan Lucic yet again, and it probably will be for the next 4 years. He's just 3 years in, and as I predicted, it's still very bad. His offense has been regressing since 2014. If you can remember, last year he had 34 points, and thus far this season, he's just 1 goal and 7 points. We knew this was coming, and now that $6 million contract is going to be around for a long time. For the Florida Panthers, James Reimer. 2017's pick was Mike Matheson, but I didn't even really think it was that bad at the time, and he's performed decently since then. But Reimer, however, has really struggled this season, and he's bringing his team down with him. He's on a $3.4 million cap hit, and this season he's at an .889 save percentage through 18 games. With 2 years remaining on this contract, Reimer better find his game, or he's not going to be around much longer. For the LA Kings, Jonathan Quick. Last year's pick, Marian Gaborik, has since been traded to the Ottawa Senators, so that he befalls on Quick this year. He's currently in the 6th year of his 10-year deal, which carries a cap hit of $5.8 million. So far this year, Quick has been horrible. He's been dealing with some injury troubles, but through 13 games played, he has an .897 save percentage. He's not performing like an NHL starter right now, and has been outplayed by both Jack Campbell and Cal Peterson. If he can't turn around at 32 years old, then $5.8 million is going to turn into a very expensive backup. For the Minnesota Wild, Greg Pateryn. Last year's pick was Tyler Ennis, and he's since been bought out of his contract, so Greg Pateryn is the pick for 2018. He's in the first year of a 3-year, $6.75 million deal, and although a 2.25 cap hit may not seem that steep, it's a bit overpriced for a depth defenseman, and the Wild don't have very many other bad contracts, as Parise has certainly turned around this season, and Suter is still an absolute animal on the back end. For the Montreal Canadiens, Carey Price. This one may piss some people off. Carl Alzner was last year's pick, and trust me, he's still terrible, but Price's contract may have outdone it. He's in the first year of his massive 8-year, $84 million contract, giving him the highest cap hit for a goalie in history at $10.5 million. It's slightly concerning at this point, as in the last 2 years combined, Price has a save percentage of .901, which is about equal to below average backup goalie. With 7 more years left, Price is already 31 years old, and this deal could turn real bad real fast. But of course, let's not write him off right away, as we all know Price could still very easily turn himself around. For the Nashville Predators, Nick Bonino. Last year's pick, Alexei Emelin's contract expired, so this year it falls on Nick Bonino, who really hasn't been bad. He has a $4.1 million cap hit, which is about right for a third-line center. However, he hasn't really been scoring like he used to, and his defensive possession numbers have been rough for someone who should be responsible defensively. For the New Jersey Devils, CORY SCHNEIDER. Last year was Travis Zajac, however he's been better this season, and CORY SCHNEIDER has definitely earned this label. He has 3 more seasons left with his $6 million cap hit, and has been absolutely brutal this season. Through 9 games played, he has an .852 save percentage, which is embarrassing for an NHL goalie, especially one making $6 million. To make things even worse, this season isn't even a huge outlier, as average for the last 3 years is a .905 save percentage. At 32 years old, if he can't turn around soon, he's become an expensive backup for Keith Kincaid. For the New York Islanders, Andrew Ladd. Last year's pick, Nikolai Kulemin's deal since expired, so we followed to Andrew Ladd this season. Ladd's at a $5.5 million cap hit and has 4 years remaining on this deal. So far this season, through 14 games, Ladd has only managed to score 3 goals and has been playing around third-line minutes. In addition, he's been horrible defensively, as his Corsi is at 42.6%. Yes, Ladd has dealt with some injury trouble this year, but that is going to be the new norm for Ladd for the rest of the contract, as he hasn't played a full 82 since 2012. For the New York Rangers, Matt Beleskey. Last year's pick was Mark Stahl, but the Rangers' acquisition of Matt Beleskey has changed their pick for me. He still has a 1 year remaining at $3.8 million and has spent the majority of the season playing in the AHL. He's only played in 5 combined games with the Rangers since they acquired him, and in those games he's been absolutely brutal both offensively and defensively. For the Ottawa Senators, Bobby Ryan. Since they offloaded Dion Phaneuf's contract, the Senators' title falls right back to Bobby Ryan, who has very much earned this right. He still has 3 years remaining on his $7.25 million contract, but he's not scored more than 25 goals since 2012. In fact, as a Senator, he's only scored more than 20 goals twice, and he's been brutal defensively. His Corsi this season so far is at 40.6%. With 3 years remaining, it looks like there's no rebounding for Bobby Ryan. This is his new norm, and the Senators will have to sit on this contract for the duration, but thankfully they won't need the cap space because no free agents are going to sign there anytime soon. For the Philadelphia Flyers, Andrew McDonald. He's probably going to retain this title until the deal is over in 2020. His $5 million cap hit is steep, and for someone who's being paid like Anton Strawman and Nick Hjalmarsson, he's never even remotely played like it. He's a below average NHL defenseman, but he's being paid like he's a first pairing difference maker. For the Pittsburgh Penguins, OLLI MAATTA. Last year was Carl Hagelin, and they've since moved on from him, so this year we're looking at OLLI MAATTA, who really hasn't been bad at all, but Pittsburgh just doesn't have a lot of bad contracts. MAATTA's at about a $4 million cap hit, and he plays about second-line minutes, but he just isn't outstanding defensively, so the main reason he's the Penguins' fall boy is really because half their team is on the league minimum. For the San Jose Sharks, Evander Kane. Last year's pick was Paul Martin, and as I've been doing lately, I nailed that pick because they've since bottomed out. This year I think it's Evander Kane, which I'm not entirely convinced about, and I'm expecting a lot of people to disagree with this. So if you can find a better pick, then let me know. But for Kane, he's in the first year of that 7-year, $49 million contract, so his $7 million cap hit is comparable to the likes of Patrice Bergeron, Max Pacioretty, and Ryan O'Reilly. However, Kane has never scored more than 60 points in his NHL career. At 27, he still has lots of good years ahead of him, so we'll see how his body holds up over the course of this deal. For the St. Louis Blues, Jake Allen. Last year I chose Jay Bouwmeester, but Allen's play this year has really changed my opinion. He's on a $4.35 million cap hit and has 2 years remaining at that number. He's been completely inconsistent this season with a save percentage of .899, and although it's lower than his career average, it's really not that far off, as his average over the last 3 seasons sits at .908, which is not starting goalie material. At 28 years old, Jake Allen's inconsistency can't be blamed on his age anymore, and if he isn't able to find his game soon, then he's going to be out of St. Louis, as I feel fans and management are already getting very tired of this constant performance. For the Tampa Bay Lightning, Ryan Callahan. Last year I chose Alex Killorn, and trust me, I still don't like Killorn's contract, but Callahan's become too obvious to ignore, no matter how biased I am against Killorn. Callahan has 1 more year left on his $5.8 million cap hit, and he's been playing on the Lightning's 4th line this season. He's only got 8 points through 30 games, and he's noticeably taken a step back. The Lightning have to re-sign Braden Point this offseason, and a $5.8 million cap hit is about $5 million too much to pay a 4th liner. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, Nikita Zaitsev. Last year's pick was Matt Martin, who's since been shipped off to Long Island, so now we're looking at Zaitsev for Toronto's scapegoat. He's in the 2nd year of that 7-year, $31.5 million deal, which gives him a cap hit of $4.5 million. He's been averaging about 20 minutes per game, which is much needed for the Leafs. However, he has minimal offensive presence, as he only has 3 assists through 34 games. In addition, his defensive possession metrics have been terrible. His Corsi is at 47.3%, and that's pretty close to what his career average is. So at 27 years old, and with a lot of RFAs this season, it'll be interesting to see what they do with this contract. For the Vancouver Canucks, it's still Louis Ericsson. At 33, Ericsson is starting to get up there, and his performance continues to show that. He's got 3 years remaining at $6 million per, and it's still not looking good. He's yet to play more than 65 games in a season with Vancouver, and he hasn't even surpassed 12 goals in a single year yet. Ericsson continues to regress, and the Canucks are going to have to dish out some big contracts to their young stars in the coming years, so we'll see what happens with this deal, but I think the most likely outcome is a marginal 3rd-line role until it eventually expires. For the Vegas Golden Knights, Nick Holden. Our pick from last year, Jason Garrison's contract has since expired, and Vegas really doesn't have any high-paying deals with term, so we're just going to default to Nick Holden. He has a $2.2 million cap hit, but he's been pretty solid, and they don't really have any bad deals, so let's not read too far into this one. For the Washington Capitals, Lars Eller. Last year's pick was Brooks Orpik, but the Caps pulled off the biggest scheme since Bernie Madoff and now have him for a much cheaper contract, so now my attention falls to Lars Eller. He's in the first year of his 5-year, $17.5 million contract, which gives him a cap hit of $3.5 million. He's never reached 40 points in a season, and he only has 4 goals so far this year, but he's been a pretty solid depth player. The Capitals don't tend to overpay, so since this isn't an outrageous deal, don't read too far into it. For the Winnipeg Jets, Dmitry Kulikov. Last year I picked Tyler Myers, but Dmitry Kulikov stands out more to me this year. He has another year left at 4.3, but he only has 1 point so far this season. Defensively, he's at negative possession numbers since 2015, and really nothing about him warrants a $4.3 million cap hit. So if you disagree with any of my picks, then let me know down below. Comment other videos that you'd like to see, and of course, if you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe.